Hi there, this is Jeff Allen. I want to address the whole question that keeps coming up about the return on investment of the whole principle of inward or inbound translation versus outward or outbound translation. I made another video about this, which is actually the first video I've made since my recording. I didn't do a recording of my conference talk on this topic at the Localization World Conference in Bonn, Germany in 2004, so it's been a long time. So I finally decided to make a video about it. This is about 2 weeks ago, and we're in 2021 right now. And I put up on my YouTube channel. So that specifically was about the whole inward, inbound versus going from that to the outward, outbound, and the mistakes that were done in the repurposing for kind of computer-generated translation topic projects. In this video, I want to be a little more specific here. That had its own specific purpose, and it's good for you to watch that video up on my YouTube channel. This one is going to be more specifically about the whole ROI principle of what can we determine ROI, return on investment, for these inward and inbound translation kind of systems, both text and speech, versus how we do it for the outward and outbound. So I'm going to explain the inward and the inward and inbound is the same thing. Okay, just two different words mean the same thing. You can whichever you want. I use both, so it doesn't. I use them interchangeably. So inbound or inward means there's something in a text or a voice, whatever, or language, or whatever, text, voice. It could be image too, whatever. But here, let's keep this speech and text. In this text, this newspaper I can't read. I'm visiting another country. I can't read the newspaper. Okay, it's in Portuguese. I can't read it. Okay, or Arabic, and I can't read it. So I need to get an idea of what this content is about. So I throw it through a system, put into a system, and it gives me, a translation. Okay, it's never perfect. Okay, it's not going to be perfect. I'm not expecting perfection here. I want to know what this is about. Okay, or a pharma. I'm going to go to get a medication. I'm going to another country and I got some medication. I need to take the medication. I don't want to, I want to kill myself or get an overdose. Okay, so I need to be able to understand this to survive. Basic essential communication. Or like in a kind of like in a doctor, kind of in disaster relief. Think of disaster relief crisis situations where doctors are coming in to like help people, save their lives, and you got to have some minimal communication what that person's trying to say to you, in order for them to help you save your life. Okay, so this is really inboard in this whole inbound. I need to understand what the other person's saying or writing. Okay, and it's really survival purposes, basic communication. This, my tolerance level of mistakes is very, very high in tolerance level, because if I don't understand anything, I might die, or I won't be able to survive, or won't be able to eat. And if you don't eat for 40 days, then you die too. So just think of yourself in this, put yourself in this situation. That's why inbound translation or inward translation is so important. Okay, and in this case, you don't measure ROI in this, okay? You either understand it or you don't. It's just that simple. And so when I hear people saying, "Oh, we can determine the ROI in this return on investment list," there isn't any. It has its purpose, and the purpose is for people. I don't have to keep saying this in different ways. We all get it, okay? It's actually a return on outcome. Does the person understand or not? If the person understands, they'll do a task or do something, or they'll give a response back, or they'll do something. It's a return on outcome. Okay, ROO. That's what we need to focus on for the content. For the content gisting inward and inbound. Okay, I want to be very clear about that. And the purpose again is understanding. And if the person understands, then they'll do something with that. That might be take the medication with the right dose, and and get healed, or it might be answer the question the doctor's asking you, and be able for that doctor to be able to do something, the nurse to do something, or it might be whatever, or it might be you understand what this is to do this order something. You can buy the food so you can continue living. Okay, whatever. this is the outcome. The outcome is that the person finally does a task or something, responds reactively, and responds in a way that it actually moves them on in their need at that moment. Okay, so it is an outcome. Now we want to transition this over to the um, and there's no need to discuss what's the word error rate in this. Okay, it doesn't matter, folks. It just doesn't matter. It doesn't matter the word error rate in the text. It doesn't matter for the speech. It doesn't matter, okay? If the person understands, then they do something with that. Okay, I want to be very clear about this. So whenever I hear people, executives or whatever, or even even computational geeks, and I'm one of them too, but it's a business thing, okay? The task is done. You do something. The task done, okay? Um, and the outcomes are done. Let's move now as we begin to move away from that whole content gisting purpose, okay? And now we're going to take it to the other purpose, which people are always assuming should be the main purpose, but it's not, because the reality of life is, I mean, look how many translations, how much translation is being done by Google Translate, Microsoft Translator, and all these online platforms. It just is exponential compared to what, the paid for translations are, okay? Because all this inbound all this inbound translation work or content gisting is done for mainly non-funded translation needs. Okay, so unfunded translation, which can be, you're on a Skype translator talking with the family members that speak other languages, and the kids don't speak the language of the grandparents, or they don't understand the language of the aunts or the uncles or cousins or something. You can't measure ROI on this. Okay, again, that's another case. This is why the outcome is, can you communicate? I mean, I remember one time we wanted to find a nanny for I had a son that was born 9 weeks premature, so we're kind of in a stuck situation. I was taking care of the 2-year-old, my adopted son, and my wife was in the hospital, and for like 10 weeks, and so I needed to have help, and I'm based in France, and the only people I can find are maybe someone in Portugal. And so there's a young lady that want to help, but we got to communicate with her parents, and her parents don't speak English or French, so we got to communicate in Portuguese, and and so we did it with a chat message with translation system. I work with translation, I use it, and you know what the outcome was? We had a discussion between English and Portuguese, and the outcome was, we figured out a way how much it's going to cost for her to come stay with us. The outcome was there. Was there a return on investment? No. Was there a return on outcome? Yes. Okay. She came and spent the I don't know how many weeks. I can't remember how she came to spend with us to get me through that situation with my young 2-year-old son, and to get my wife, so that we could finally get to the point where my younger son was born, and we got to go visit him in the hospital, and there was an outcome. Okay. Again, these are examples of return on outcome. Okay, so that's the whole. So this, and it's usually a non-budgeted translation. I wasn't going to pay for a translation for a discussion in Portuguese with someone to be able to have a nanny come. That's going to be I'm not sending a full-time thing. I mean, this is kind of like this is a it's this kind of thing it is. I mean, this happens all the time, folks. So this is non-budgeted translation. So that's what you need to focus on: non-budgeted translation. This whole thing, and that's how Google and Babelfish started out. Okay, Babelfish started out in 1997 this way, in December 1997 this way, and that's just a huge growing. I mean, all companies are dealing with it. Governments are dealing with it. There's a tons. I mean, the amount of non-budgeted translation is so phenomenal. Just it's so big, okay? But now we're going to take it over to the outbound part, or the outward part, which is called translation for publication. That's where the money is. That's where budgeted money is. Budgeted translation. And it's always under budget, because there's never enough, because there's 30% of more translation needs per year for budget translation. But you'll never get 30% more translate. If you get 30% more budget every single year, then we'd be at 100% budget in a few years. That's pretty simple, but it's never done. And so you have to choose and prioritize what you're going to translate with that 30% of budget, okay? And and in this translation for publication, this outbound approach, because I'm taking my product, my service, and I want to globalize it into a bunch of languages, 2 or 3 or 4 more, and I want to sell the product to make profit. So I have to have a return on investment of that, so I can make profit off of what I'm making. I'm doing here to make money, okay, for my service or product, and that's where you begin to talk about return on investment, and that's where you're going to begin looking at all the details of measurements to determine how good it is, because you're providing a high quality. Remember the first one we talked about, the whole inbound thing, was about just understanding. If you understand, the person does a task. Done. Now in the outbound part, where it's translation for publication, you want them to buy it. It's a selling thing. You are selling your product. You are selling your service, and either they buy it or not. Now that's a little bit more of a that's more critical, because you're trying to get them to buy into your thing you're trying to sell them, whereas there are other competitors, and you want to show that you're better than the other competitors. That's what it comes down to. And so you're using the translation of that content to actually be your unique selling point, to be able to sell your product or service. That's where it comes into play, this whole thing of quality of the translation, whether it be the translation of the text or the translation of the voice, okay? And the word choice, the selection of words can make it. If you get the wrong word in there and it gives a wrong meaning, well, you might not sell your product or service, okay? And if it doesn't have the kind of a really good grammar, kind of flowing way that sounds kind of natural in written text or in spoken voice, then it won't sell the product, okay? So this is where we start getting all these details and measurements about, fluency of it and grammatical correctness of it, and and stylistic preferences of it. And now we get into all the little details of word error rate measurements, of distance, and all that kind of stuff. And I'm not going to go all these things. All of you that know this, you know what I'm talking about, okay? And what we need to do is we should only talk about these little details of measurements on the outbound translation for publication needs, because that's really where it comes into play. And that's where the return on investment, ROI, comes into play. Now, you can also talk about ROO, return on outcome, for that, because then people will do something afterwards, okay? But I really want to make these two distinctions. And these things are I'm sorry, I'm touching my microphone here. People are, they don't get it clearly enough. We need to separate. So we need to not apply the same measurements and things on the whole content gesting inbound kind of approach, or have expectations for it. People come to me and say, "Oh no, for the Haitian Creole speech recognition, what's your return on investment?" I don't talk about that. What's the word error rate? I don't talk about it, because I'm only trying to have that kind of thing for the system I built in 1998, and any potential system right now would only be a prototype. It would only work if my Haitian Creole colleagues in 1998, when we did that prototype, we came back all the speech files, third wave of all the speech data collection, okay? Bam, in 1 week we made the speech models. Bam, we had the system running. They were doing a demo, and they're crying. Haitians crying in front while they're doing their demo of their language. I don't need to have any return on investment things. The fact that they're crying is the outcome, okay? They've understood that this works. And we also had a thing where you could change the words on the display. You could re-say the word again or something, and it would back translate. Now, we made it so you could make it was for basic communication, okay? And it comes back to, I won't have to rehash this several times about why this distinction is important. But I hope this makes sense. And that we need to stop trying to apply the measurements and stop, if executives are going to come to me and I'm going to pitch them as something about a purpose-driven inbound content gesting thing, and ask me ROI, I said, well, let's not touch it, okay, folks, because we're not going to get an ROI. We won't begin to touch that until we start wanting to do the outbound stuff. And I pitch that as a different thing. I don't pitch them the same way when I talk about these things. So, and again, see my other video I talk about how bad we are, the cross-pollination in the languages, because we don't know how to pitch. We don't know how to pitch. You got to pitch them differently to get the funding for them, and don't try to apply the pitching of one to the pitching of the other, because you're not going to get the funding for it. So this is again good selling practices and selling it. So thanks for sticking around. I hope that gives you some things to think about as you begin to struggle with and get through your struggle of how you want to get funding for things here. And I got other videos on this channel about how to get funding for that, how to get funding for this. Just go watch the number of different videos. They're all kind of treating different angles of this, and this is just another angle to help out. Okay, thanks so much for listening. I really do appreciate it. And if